You set 3 alarms this morning. You checked your phone before your feet hit the floor. You had 17 things on your to-do list by the time you finished breakfast. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, a quiet thought slipped through. What did people actually do before all of this? Not the history book version, not kings and wars and dates. What did an ordinary human being actually do with their day 50,000 years ago? What filled the hours? What did they worry about? What did they do when the work was done? The answer will probably surprise you, and it changes something about the way you see your own life. Start here. In 1966, anthropologist Richard Lee traveled to the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa to study the Kungsan people, one of the last hunter-gatherer groups living in a way that closely resembled our deep ancestral past. He tracked their time. He counted their hours. He measured exactly how much of each day they spent finding food, making tools, building shelter, and doing everything else required to survive. His findings stunned the academic world. The Kungsan worked, on average, about 15 to 20 hours per week. Not per day, per week. The rest of the time they rested, talked, played, visited neighboring camps, danced, and slept. Lee called it the original affluent society. Not rich in things, rich in time. Marshall Solins, the American anthropologist, picked up this idea in his landmark 1972 essay, Stone Age Economics. His argument was blunt. The Ta Kung San and groups like them were not suffering through a brutal, desperate existence. They had simply chosen a different definition of enough. They needed fewer things than modern humans assume, and because they needed fewer things, they needed fewer hours to obtain them. This does not mean ancient life was easy. It was not. But it was organized differently than almost everything your intuition tells you it should have been. So what did a day actually look like? Your ancient ancestor probably woke near sunrise, not because of an alarm, because of light. Human circadian rhythms, the internal biological clock studied extensively by researchers like Russell Foster at the University of Oxford, are tuned to the solar cycle. Before artificial light, your body woke when the sun rose and grew tired when it set. That biological wiring has not changed. It is still inside you right now. The first task of the morning was fire. If the group was in a region where nights were cold, someone would tend the fire through the night. By morning, it would need feeding. Fire was not decorative. It was warmth, protection from predators, and the technology that made food digestible. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham of Harvard University has argued, in his 2009 book Catching Fire, that cooking over fire fundamentally changed the human body. It softened food, released more calories per bite, and may have allowed the human gut to shrink while the human brain expanded. Fire was, in Wrangham's framing, the original technology that made you human. After fire came water. Finding and carrying water was daily work, and it often fell to women and older children. Distances varied by season and landscape, but water sources shaped where groups moved, when they moved, and how long they stayed. Then came food. Here is where most people's assumptions break completely. Your ancient ancestor was almost certainly not spending the entire day hunting. Hunting, especially large game hunting, was sporadic, often unsuccessful, and calorie expensive. A failed hunt burned more energy than it recovered. Primatologist Kim Hill, who has studied the ape people of Paraguay for decades, found that experienced ape hunters successfully killed large game on roughly 1 in every 4 to 5 hunting trips. The rest of the time, they returned with small animals, nothing at all, or simply gathered plant foods instead. The real nutritional backbone of most hunter-gatherer diets in most parts of the world was gathered plant food. Roots, tubers, berries, seeds, nuts, leaves. This work was predominantly done by women and children, and it was remarkably reliable. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes, through her decades-long fieldwork with the Hadza people of Tanzania, found that women's foraging contributed 60 to 80% of total caloric intake in many hunter-gatherer groups. The dramatic hunt was important, but it was not the foundation. Gathering was also not a frantic scramble. It was unhurried, deliberate, and knowledgeable. Your ancestor knew their landscape with an intimacy that is almost impossible to imagine today. They knew which roots were edible in which season, which berries were ripe, which plants were poisonous, and which animal tracks meant which animal had passed how recently. This knowledge was accumulated over a lifetime and passed down across generations. It was, in every meaningful sense, a form of expertise. By midday, the heaviest physical work was usually done. Heat in many climates made midday movement uncomfortable and dehydrating. Groups rested. Children played. Adults talked. Talk. This is something the archaeological record cannot preserve, but what evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar of the University of Oxford has argued is that social conversation, gossip specifically, was the original glue of human society. Dunbar's research suggests that among modern hunter-gatherer groups, roughly 2/3 of all conversation is social. Stories about other people, relationships, who did what, who can be trusted, who cannot. This was not idle chatter. It was how groups built and maintained the social bonds that made cooperation possible, and cooperation was survival. Your ancient ancestor lived in a group of roughly 50 to 150 people. Dunbar's number, his famous estimate of the cognitive limit of stable human social groups, sits at around 150. Within that group, reputation mattered enormously. Who was generous? Who was a reliable hunter? Who shared meat when the hunt was good? And who hoarded? These questions were answered through conversation, through story, through the steady accumulation of social knowledge that happened every single day around the fire and in the shade of the midday rest. In the afternoons, work continued. Tools were made and repaired. Stone tools required skill to knap correctly, a craft that experimental archaeologist Dietrich Stout of Emory University has shown activates the same neural circuits in the brain as modern language production. Making a hand axe was not simple mechanical labor. It was a cognitively demanding activity, one that may have co-evolved with human language ability itself. Clothing was repaired. Shelters were maintained. Medicines, which in many hunter-gatherer societies meant plants with known pharmacological properties, were prepared or gathered. Children were taught, not in classrooms, but through observation, imitation, and practice, and play. Children in hunter-gatherer societies play, at length, in mixed-age groups, with significant adult tolerance for risk. Anthropologist David Lancy of Utah State University, who has spent decades cataloging childhood across cultures, notes that hunter-gatherer children have far more unstructured time than children in agricultural or industrial societies. They learn by watching, by doing, by failing, and by trying again. This kind of self-directed learning may be the original mode of human development. Evenings, as the sun dropped, brought the group back together. Fire was central again, food was shared, and sharing was not optional. In most hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, meat from a successful hunt was distributed across the entire group according to established customs. Hoarding was socially dangerous. Generosity was currency. Individuals who refused to share faced social consequences, including exclusion, which in a world without grocery stores or hospitals was potentially fatal. Around the fire in the evenings came story. Story is not entertainment in the modern sense. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner of the University of Utah published a landmark 2014 study in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, in which she recorded the content of conversations among the Jew/Hwansi people of the Kalahari across different times of day. During the day, conversations were primarily practical: food, resources, complaints, economic matters. At night, around the fire, the content shifted dramatically. Roughly 81% of nighttime conversation consisted of stories, and a significant portion of those stories contained what Wiesner called distant time and place narratives, meaning stories about people who were not present, events that happened far away or long ago, or possibilities that had not yet occurred. Firelight, Wiesner argues, extended the social day and opened a cognitive space for imagination, planning, and the kind of narrative thinking that may have been essential to the development of human culture. Your ancestor did not watch stories. Your ancestor told them, heard them, and lived inside them. Sleep, when it came, was not the isolated single-block 8-hour sleep you have probably been told is normal. Researcher Jerome Siegel of UCLA, studying the Hadza, the San, and the Tzimon people of Bolivia, found that hunter-gatherers typically sleep in polyphasic patterns, waking briefly during the night, sometimes lying quietly awake, sometimes tending the fire. They sleep an average of 6.5 hours per night, not 8. They go to sleep not at a fixed hour, but as temperature drops, and they wake not with an alarm, but with the gradual rise of light and warmth. The ancient day was physical, social, skilled, and rhythmic. It was embedded in the landscape, regulated by light and season, and structured almost entirely around the needs of the group, rather than the individual. Now step back into your own life, your 3 alarms, your 17 tasks, your screen-bright morning, your isolated sleep in a silent, temperature-controlled room. Almost nothing about how most modern humans spend their time maps onto the life your biology was built for. The loneliness that research repeatedly links to poor health, the chronic sleep disruption, the sedentary hours, the social thinness, the loss of story, of fire, of the kind of embodied, unhurried knowing that comes from a lifetime spent in one landscape. None of this means you should abandon modernity. It means something more specific, that the restlessness you feel, the vague sense that something is missing, the hunger for connection and story and slow, unhurried time is not weakness. It is ancient. It is yours. It was there before the first alarm ever rang.